a slightly more difficulty defining compatibilism. Can you clear that
I
up?
think I might be able to clear that up. I think that was one that I actually...
I do want to get to something after that about infinities, about causation.
Hidden regrets.
Yeah, exactly, because I think that has a lot to do with, I guess, the whole making sense rationally of...
Can I erase this, Kelly?
Sure.
Yeah.
She's just...
No, not to me. I think of compatibilism more like... Let's change this tab out. Gotta be philosophical, got it. Okay, so the compatibilist can choose to make a right or wrong decision, and if they make this decision, then it'll lead to this. If they make this decision, then it could lead to this. And this decision determines what happens next. Like, that's how I understand compatibilism.
Oh, okay. So basically, you can make some decisions, but these decisions sometimes create a domino effect that cause, some sort of result that is now out of your control.
Right, and just because you do something right doesn't necessarily mean that you will get something good as an outcome. Like, maybe you can, but then you can fall into a pit, like something bad can happen.
Yeah.
But you can decide how you're going to react.
Yeah, I understand. Your
Yeah.
karma doesn't work perfectly every time, so cookie cutter.
But each decision causes the next.
Yeah, that is if you believe in karma.
Yeah.
Not everyone does.
So C equals what?
Compatibilist.
Oh,
If that's accurate, actually, that's probably the best explanation I ever got. I remember talking to David about some of his analogies, and I always felt that they were flawed in some way. And no fault of his own, but I just, it never stuck, because I remember it was something about like a guy being pinned down by a boulder, and suddenly he wanted to lift it, but he wasn't strong enough, so he's trying to actively force, but,
to tell you the truth, I was a little confused with this theory. Do you want to explain that again a little bit?
Yeah, okay.
Because, I'm sorry, just really fast. Kelly's interpretation, at least so far as my understanding of it, that sounded about my understanding equally about compatibilism. So maybe you have the same thing. I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah.
So I got determinism?
No. You just defined compatibilism correctly.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Well, according to the way I see it, but.
Yeah, compatibilist, they're both free. It's both a free person and a determined person. Like you can't really control what the physical brings to you, but you can control how you react to it. It's kind of like a stoic perception of life.
Okay.
But you have a choice though. Like you do have, the inner agent does have a choice to choose to do this or choose to do that. And whatever choice they make, it's determines what will happen next. But what's not determined is how they choose to react to the determined physical action that's been done.
To some extent, when I think about compatibilism in that light, and by the way, you and Kelly have a very similar interpretation. It was just my lack of understanding there. Let me see, this thought was a little way off. Let's paint that picture you were talking about, the boulder. Or a boulder.
Yeah, you said an asteroid or a meteorite.
Comes to from outer space, and here's my little house right there. All of a sudden, bang! That's me now, and I'm pinned down, literally.
Yeah.
But miraculously, this little subsection here doesn't crush me. It's just I'm still alive. I just can't move. And so, I'm screaming for help, but there's nobody can move this subsection without cutting me in half and killing me. So my inner desire is to move from this spot, but an external factor is what's leaving me here. So we got internal here, my desires, my ability to choose and speak and say things that are in my control.
Yeah.
And then things that are not in my control, that namely which are physical things.
Yeah. My biggest problem with this analogy was always that the external force made it literally impossible for the individual and the interior motives to actually accomplish anything. So, and once you're at that point, it's basically determinism in my mind, for the very reason that you are being ping-ponged around. You have no choice. You can feel away, you can think away, you can even believe you have free will, but ultimately you're literally stopped from doing otherwise. You're literally stopped from doing anything other than whatever I suppose you would say is causally determined. And within this framework, suddenly it's almost as if you're just a non-determinist living in a deterministic world, and that's all it really represents.
Well, free will isn't freedom to, it's not a free power, like free control. It's just a will. You know, you may not, like physically you may not have control. You are under like a certain law that you can't control. But the inner agent, once again, is free as to how they react to what they can't control. So will isn't necessarily control of the physical, I don't think.
The distinction you're making is like kind of like really teasing me to make an argument right now about material and immaterial again.
Right.
So because it seems that that's pivotal if we're going to understand anything about free will. I mean, because there's things in physics that are they're physical, but they become so minute and so indeterministic.
Right.
I'm talking about quantum mechanics here, that we can't pinpoint a location of a piece of energy, and the closer we try to get to that, and a different sort of measurement kind of becomes skewed.
I understand. You know what I think my problem was? Is that determinism is not even though it is focused very much on the physical, in the initial building up of the theory, it initially came from the premise that is entirely atheistic, and therefore we have no souls, therefore humans are governed by the laws of physics, therefore human behavior is governed by the laws of physics. That's basically where determinism comes from.
Yeah,
but it's not just physical in the sense of, but it does go into behavior and will and the way we think. So that's kind of why, and consciousness, exactly. So that's why in the compatibilistic theory, the idea of people having their own choice just didn't do it for me, because I'm just thinking, well, couldn't that will just be causally determined too, like in determinism? But I suppose the point of compatibilism is saying, well, that isn't. That's the only thing that isn't.
There's, as far as the distinction between mind and body, I understand that purpose, but it's almost, purely overtones of atheism. Or at least a naturalistic framework about how they interpret it.
Yeah, it's not theological in any way. It's just saying that it's based off the idea that there is no non-physical mind, there is no soul. It's just basically starts with the premise that we are entirely physical and moves to what it believes is the most logical conclusion, running with that original premise.
Well, I don't know, for some reason, and I hate to stab my own, I guess, I'm somewhat atheist, so my own, I guess, creed in the back, instead of creed, call that. But it seems that there is something very, vitiating, very convincing about the mind, and that it's not just physical. And I think this is where I think naturalism has wrong, which doesn't say anything about atheism,
Well,
it's just
yeah.
something about naturalism.
Well, I mean, understand that if you ask an atheist about the non-physical mind, one of the most common arguments you look at, and I'm doing stereotype, caricatures, make it as offensive as you want. I'm a Christian, I love God, there is no God, whatever. But ultimately, what you get is they will say, well, there is no non-physical mind, because if your mind gets damaged, your cognitive functions will be damaged. It seems logical to them, if there was a non-physical mind, that it would be preserved in some way. However, obviously your non-physical cognitive ability is immediately affected by some sort of damage to the physical brain, which is an actual organ. So that's ultimately...
All we have right there is a relation, I think.
I understand.
There's a relation between, we've noticed, and it really comes from, I guess, an epistemological concern of pragmatism, that it works because it has a Humean sort of pragmatism.
True.
Which, don't quote me on those words, that sounds very, very different than what it really actually represents. But Humean pragmatism in the sense that, how he defines miracles, how everything's governed by natural laws and nature hasn't changed yet. and it doesn't seem like it's going to. So anyway, that sort of principle is what I have in mind when I'm talking about the relation between physical and non-physical things.